My name is Emil Shehadeh. I am a medical doctor with interest in sharing the gospel with Muslims. With me is a man who needs no introduction, Professor Dr. J. Smith. He's going to discuss with us the historical and textual criticism of Islam. Professor J. Smith got his PhD from Melbourne School of Theology. And I believe you teach a degree. Do you want to tell us about your degree course, Jay?
Yeah, we've started an entire degree course that I was asked to do this by Veritas International University. For those who don't know what that is, that's the Calvary Chapel Seminary. That's their seminary. And they asked me to come on board because they said, now you have your doctorate, we need somebody to really engage and to teach polemics and apologetics. So we started this program. When I say we, it's Dr. Daniel Janasic and I. I'm the director, he's the co-director. And we have three other professors that we brought on board, Dr. Dan Brubaker. We also have Al-Fadi, who's soon to get his doctorate, and then Dr. Paul Blackham. And we teach 10 courses. All of them are 8 weeks long. It's called the MAPI program, Master of Arts in Apologetics and Polemics to Islam. It's the first in the world. There's no other master's degree on apologetics or polemics, not on Islamics. Any other place. So we have around 230 students. Not all of them are master's degrees. We also have audit students who can still read all the material and be on board with the populi with the other students. And then they don't take any tests, they don't do any papers, they don't do anything for a degree, but they get a certificate if they go through all the courses. And then we have what we call personal enrichment. These are usually missionaries on the field. They already have their masters, they don't need any accreditation, but they want to learn the material, they want it in place because we are live every Monday night. We do not can anything. Everything is live and we're there for 2 hours of lecture and then we wait for questions and answers by Zoom webinar in 23 countries we're in right now. So the students can throw things at us that works, that don't work, and also how to apply it in the different locales.
Very helpful, thank you. Jay, you are known for your repertoire, the book, the man, and now the place. So we're going to explore these in this order. Let's start with the book, the Quran. Why don't Muslims apply textual criticism to the Quran?
Emil, this is what's interesting. Historically, we've always had polemics that is always attacking what we call internal polemics. You open the Quran, you open its pages, you read the pages, you read what's here, and then you confront it. You confront the historical anachronisms, or you confront the scientific errors, or you confront the contradictions, or you confront the violence or the misogyny. That's looking at it internally. You do the same thing with Muhammad. You look at Muhammad's life and you confront him internally. Look at what he did with women, what he did with violence. That's called internal polemics. A second form of polemics is what we call cultural polemics, where you confront Islam as it is today around the world, socially, culturally, politically, financially, and also ethically. But this is a completely new form. This is a third form of polemics that we're introducing, and it's called the external polemics. It's the historical critique, which starts from the premise that we don't even want to look at that book. I don't want to open one page. I want to know where that book came from. I don't even look at Muhammad. I don't care dilly swat about this man, what he did with women or men or anything else. I want to know if he even existed, if he's historically viable. And then we have added a third, as you mentioned, Mecca itself. Mecca, the city, because all three of these, the book, the man, and the place, that's the Quran, the Muhammad, and Mecca, all existed in the 7th century. And when you read this book, this only referenced Mecca once, but when you read it, it only references this Muhammad 4 times. So it doesn't, they're not very, in fact, it's curious. If this is the major man in all of history, if this is the final prophet, why is he only mentioned 4 times? And when you look at him, there's nothing about him that you can see, but it's interesting because it looks like they got the wrong name. And if Mecca is the greatest city for the history of mankind, why is it only mentioned once? So what we're doing is we're asking those questions. Did this man, did that book, and did that city, was it there in the 7th century, like Muslims tell us? Why they don't want to do it? I'll tell you why. Everything we use is evidence, only from the 7th century. And everything Muslims are going to have to use to defend that book, that man, and that place is going to have to come from the 7th century. Now, you know that there's nothing in the 7th century about Muhammad. There's nothing there about the Quran. There's nothing there about Mecca. It doesn't exist. Nor the 8th century. Really, this material on this book, this man, and this place only begin to be introduced in the 9th century. But as we're finding out, it's not even the 9th century. This is now being introduced in the 11th, 12th, 15th, up until the 19th century. So you can see, why don't Muslims want to get into this? Where are they going to go for evidence? They can't find evidence at all. We've got all the evidence.
Why have the readings, what are called qira'at in Arabic, confounded the Quran's preservation claim?
All right, here we go. I have two of them right here with me. These are both qira'ats. That's the Arabic for reading. You've just said it. You say it a lot better than I do because you speak the language. I desecrate it. Here is one qira'at. Now, if I open it up, you'll notice it's all written in Arabic. And you can read it today, can't you? Because it has 5 dots and it has 5 vowels. But in the 7th century, when supposedly this book was written, when it was compiled, there were no dots, there were no vowels. So it's obviously this is not from the 7th century. You can see that immediately. This is a much later rendition. The 5 dots, the one above, the na, the ta, the tha, the 2 below, ba, and ya, those 5 were only being introduced in the 8th century. They were really only canonized in the 9th century. And the 3 vowels, the dhamma, the kasra, and the fatha, u, the e, and the ah vowel, those were only introduced in the 8th and canonized possibly as late as the 10th century. You've got a problem. You can't read the text. If I were to give you this book as a native Arab speaker, you could not read it without the dots and vowels. It wouldn't make any sense. So that's the problem. They didn't know what they were reading. So that's why they had to invent the 5 dots and the 3 vowels. Now, do that. Here's the difficulty. It would be okay if they had been invented in one place, in one school, and then that became the standard, and then they created the Quran with that standard and then sent that all over the world. But they didn't. They let everybody, whoever they wanted to put their dots where they wanted to. So you put your dots where you want to. You come from Kufa. I don't live in Kufa. I live up in Cairo, and I put my dots where I want to. Now, this is your Quran. This is called the Hafs Quran from Kufa. That's just south of Baghdad. You have your dots here. I have my dots, and this is my Quran. I come from Cairo, and my name is Warish. I died in 812. You died in 796. Bingo. Do you see a problem there? If you put your Quran together and you died in 796, that's 144 years after Muhammad. Therefore, Muhammad never read this, not your Quran. He never saw those dots. He didn't know what dots were. And certainly this does not come from Muhammad. It comes from you.
So how many qira'at do we have?
7 qira'ats that were first chosen in the 10th century. Then we have another 3 that were chosen by Al-Jazari in the 15th century. That's 1429.
And each qira'at has...
Each qira'at has their own students.
Riwayat.
2 students. They're called the riwayats. In the rawis, there are, 2 for this first 7, that's another 14. And that's where these 2 come into place. Here's what's interesting. These are not qira'ats. I misnomered that. You notice that? These are riwayats. So these are students of the qira'ah. Yet these are the 2 most famous in the world today. This one is memorized by 93% of the world's Muslim population.
How many riwayat do we have?
We have 14 for the first 7 and another 6 for the next 3. So that would be 14 plus 6. That would be 20 plus the 10. So we only have 10 qira'ats, none of which are the most important. None of which are the ones memorized today. These are the ones that are memorized. These are the students. Now, here's the question I want to throw at the people. This is what Muslims don't know. Why were those first 7 chosen? Well, the Muslims will tell you they were chosen because Muhammad heard it that way. And so therefore, it was done in 7 ahruf.
7 letters, yeah.
7 readings, or as they would say, 7 different, not languages, but...
It literally means letters.
Okay, letters, 7 different letters. If there are 7 different letters, does a letter change the word?
Yeah. Well, they claim each letter corresponds to a dialect, an Arabic dialect.
So it's a dialect. So you say tomato, I say tomato, you say potato, I say potato. This has nothing to do with dialects. This has nothing to do with pronunciation. These are letters that are changed, complete letters that are changed, which changes the word, which changes the meaning, which changes the theology, which changes the doctrine, and it changes the practice. That's the disturbing. But no one had heard of this. No one knew about this. At least in modern days, the academics did, of course, but no one on the ground knew this. The whole world hadn't heard this until Hatun Tosh, my colleague, 5'2", went to Morocco and innocently went into a bookstore and said, "Could you please, I buy one of your Qurans in Arabic?" He said, "Well, which one do you want?" She said, "What do you mean?" "Well, we have Qalun here, over here we have Kisai, we have Warish over here, we have Hafs, we have Ibn Kathir." She says, "What are you talking about?" She says, "Well, these are the different readings. What depends on which one you memorize." Memorize? You memorize them differently? Yes, of course. She said, "Well, give me all of them." So she brought them back to London. I looked at them. I started laughing. She said, "Well, how many are there?" Well, I said, "You have 7 plus 14 plus 3 plus 6. What do you get? 30. 30 different qira'ats and riwayats.
And they're all preserved, and yet they're all different. How does that
Of
work?
course they're preserved. You can buy them all. You
No.
can get them online. These
I
I
mean,
got
the
online.
doctrine of the preservation of the Quran.
Okay.
How
See,
does
the
that work?
preservation of Quran is this. Here's the problem. Every Muslim knows, whether they are radical, nominal, or liberal, that there is only one Quran and it is eternal. That's in the Quran itself. That's in chapter 85, verse 21 and 22, the preserved tablets.
Yeah.
So that is it has always been. But if it's preserved, that means no human can touch it or change it. That's in the Quran as well.
Yes.
In chapter 10, verse 15, and chapter 18, verse 27, it says no one can change a word. Or, as the Muslims say, not one letter, even not one dot. Now, they've gone beyond what the Quran says.
And Allah is the keeper of His word.
And you know where that is? That's in chapter 15, verse 9. So the Quran itself makes these claims. We don't make the claims. Muslims don't make the claim. The Quran says isn't that interesting? The plural God will guard it. So no one can, because God guards it. Not one word, not one letter can be changed. So they have to make sure that every Quran is the same. So when Hatun came with just 6 of them, and then she found 26 of them within the next 2 years, we took them down to Speaker's Corner, held them up for the whole world to see, filmed it, and put it up on YouTube. This caused such enormous reaction from Muslims that Muhammad Hijab, who is well known on the internet, had to do this interview on June the 8th, 2020, to ask Dr. Yasir Qadhi, the world's leading authority on this subject, what are we going to do? And this is what he did. He put his hand out. He says, which Quran is this eternal Quran? Which one of these is the one that Muhammad received? Which one of these? Before he could end his sentence, Yasir Qadhi says, do not ask this question. We do not talk about this in public.
So self-defeating it was.
Absolutely. Yeah. He said this has been the most difficult problem for the last 1,000 years. Emil, he went on and say, Shatibi, who wrote 80 books on this, never came to any conclusion. He died in 1429, the 15th century. So you can see, as 800 years after Muhammad, they still didn't know what to do with this. He said, you, looking at Muhammad Hijab, you in the East, your standard narrative, the things you're saying about the Quran, that it's eternal, that it's never been changed, that it's been completely preserved, your standard narrative has holes in it without realizing this is what he has been saying for years himself. He is the one. We have video after video saying not one word, not one letter has been changed. The Quran is always the Quran and always will be the Quran. That's Yasir Qadhi speaking. And so he's telling Muhammad Hijab, your standard narrative has holes in it. And he says that in the West, they've come leaps and bounds, and they're looking at us like the emperor with no clothes. So finally, after 28 minutes, he puts out his hand a second time. Muhammad Hijab to Yasir Qadhi, tell me, you've got to tell me, which is the preserved Quran? Yasir Qadhi says they're all the Quran. A little bit of Warsh, a little bit of Hafs, a little bit of Qalun, just mix them around. I started clapping. I was filming it. I was recording it. I started clapping because he didn't know what I know and what you know. When you look at these 30 Qurans and you just compare them, there are 93,000 different words, 93,000 different phrases, 93,000 different verses, 93,000 different doctrines, different theologies, different practices. He has just destroyed the Quran. In 2 weeks, I was watching the comments at the bottom of both our videos. In 2 weeks, there were hundreds of Muslims saying we have left Islam. And our blood is going to be on your shoulders.
But it's interesting, most Muslims haven't read the Quran. They're not even aware of some of the claims the Quran makes.
But every Muslim is aware of this claim.
Yes.
Every Muslim, there is not one word, not one letter. Every Muslim. This shuts down for every Muslim. And what was interesting, they had to finally delete that interview after 2 months. Now, hundreds of Muslims left Islam because of that one debate. 28 minutes. Look at the damage that did. The reason it did so much damage is because the claims that these books make. It's the Quran itself that shoots itself in the foot. Look at these two right here. This is yours. That's Warsh. This is Hafs. How many differences do you find between these two books? 5,000. 5,000 between these. So if you're going to memorize this book, and you'll be North Africa if you memorize this. This is their favorite. You can't memorize this then because you're going to have to rememorize everything again. So therefore, you stick to this one. So they're not going to leave these. They're not going to give up on them.
No.
But then how do you then say that the Quran is eternal? How then do you say that the Quran has never changed?
Point well made. Where did the Quran really come from?
Well, you're asking me, a layman. Of course, I know exactly where the Quran is. You just read the book. And this is stuff that has been done with this new scholarship, like Dr. Gunther Lulling in 1970. He was the first one to really expose it. And what he did, of course, this was done even, St. Clair Tisdale did this in the last century. He came up and showed that there were all kinds of words that had been borrowed. There were stories. Look at all these apocryphal writings. Chapter 5, verse 31, a story of Cain and Abel. That comes from the Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah. If you look at the story of Abraham, of Abraham, there in, well, not the Kaaba, the Masjid al-Haram, which would be the forbidden place of bowing. Muslims call it the Kaaba. And of course, supposedly he's there in Mecca in chapter 21, verse 51 to 71, where he goes in and destroys all the idols inside. That comes from the Mishnah of Rabbah, a Jewish apocryphal account. St. Clair Tisdale was showing this, the great story in chapter 27, verse 17 to 44, of the story of Solomon and Sheba and the hoopoe bird and the Queen of Sheba. All of that comes from the second Targum of Esther. So these are Jewish apocryphal writings written in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century that were then incorporated into the Quran that you see here. They are not part of the Bible. We know that Abraham was not in the Kaaba. He was not in Mecca. We know that Solomon was not talking to birds and ants. That all comes from these fairy tales that were done by Jews. They were in the Targums for a reason. They were never considered to be authoritative.
Can you talk about the Syriac or Aramaic content of the Quran?
Well, now we come to probably the most damaging part. And this is the beautiful poetry that's in the Quran. Muslims look at this poetry and they say, how is it that Muhammad, who is illiterate, could have written such gorgeous poetry? Well, Gunther Lulling was interested in this. And so he decided to do his doctoral thesis in Germany on this, and he got an Examen Opus Examen, sorry, it's the other way around. This is the highest grade you can get. What he did is simple. He just took the dots that we were talking about earlier, took them off, went back to the consonantal text, took the vowels off, and went back to the 16 letters, of which the Quran shares with Aramaic, the same 16 letters. And then he added those dots and those vowels, and suddenly he found out that these beautiful poems were not poems written by anybody or received by Muhammad. They were written by Christians, written in the 5th and 6th century, and incorporated that and borrowed and slapped into the Quran. But Dr. Christoph Luxemburg went one step further. He wanted to find out about these dark passages that nobody about 25% of the Quran are made up of these dark passages that no one knows about. And so he wanted to see if he could uncover them. And so he went through 7 different steps. I won't go through all of them, but basically what he did, he tried different lexicons, different dictionaries, both in Arabic, and then he finally took the dots off, like Christoph Luxemburg, and put the dots back on using Syro-Aramaic, which he was a scholar of, and then suddenly he went to their lexicons and to their dictionary, and suddenly he was able to reapply and see what the words were. And when he looked at them, these were all lectionaries, these were all homilies, and these were all hymns to Jesus Christ. They were beautiful hymns. Let me give you an example. If you don't have your Quran in front of you, here's one in chapter 23. If you look at Surah 23, you look at there, and here is a hymn. Now, it's only 11 verses long, and what's fascinating, it talks about the obligations of a believer and the rewards. So it says, successful indeed are the believers, those who offer their salat. So do your prayers, is what it's saying, with all solemnity and full submission. And those who turn away from laga, which means dirty or false or vain talk. And then those who pay the zakat, so that's 3. So do your prayers, don't use bad language, and pay your tithing, the zakat. And those who guard your chastity. Those are 4 things that require the believer. Beautiful up to now, right? Then suddenly verse 5 is followed by verse 6. But then verse 6 says, except for their wives or their slaves, that which their right hand possesseth, for them they are free to blame. In other words, you can have as many wives as you want, and that which your right hand possesses. Wait a minute, that just slaps you in the face. What's that doing there? That's not the definition of chastity, but it is in the Quran. Isn't that interesting? Then we start with verse 8. Those who are faithfully true to their amamat, and I mean it's their duties, and to their covenants, and those who rightly guard their monotheism, and those who do these, what they have just been said, it is to them, and let's stay in the page, and those who do their prayers, they are the inheritors, they will inherit paradise. So if you do these 4 things, you will inherit paradise. It's a beautiful poem except for verse 5 and 6. What's verse 5 and 6 doing there? Well, he wanted to find out. So he decided to do some tracing back and looking around and seeing if he could find that there was an antecedent, and he found it. This is a hymn written by Saint Ephraim in the 4th century, a beautiful hymn written about the obligations of a believer and the rewards if you do these things. But 5 and 6 are not in that hymn. That was added later by the Arabs so that they could play with their women, have as many. They sexualized it. They adulterated the whole word chastity. But here's what's most interesting. When you looked at this beautiful hymn written in Syriac, it is written in mnemonics. So every end of the word rhymed. So make it easier to memorize as a praise. It's no longer it has this mnemonics in Arabic. So it not only adulterated the mnemonics, it also adulterated the content, and it absolutely adulterated the whole term and view. So here is what the Arabs did. They put the dots back in and they adulterated it right, left, and center. Chapter 70, the verse said very same thing. So this is, when you start to look at this, we can pretty well take it back to its original time. If we take the Quran back to its original text, it's not what we're going to find, it's who we're going to find. His name is Jesus Christ.
Just a little remark on the Aramaic content of the Quran. There's a lot of it there, and it comports with Muhammad apparently choosing this young Jew because he was proficient in Aramaic and Hebrew. I know you think he didn't exist, but it comports according to the Muslim narrative.
I think that instant exists. I don't think it had anything to do with a man named Muhammad.
Okay.
I think those who were scribes, they needed help. That's why they went to the Aramaic. And guess who
But
spoke
he was
Aramaic?
an expert, yeah.
He wasn't an expert. The Muhammad was. Oh, you see, the
Thabit,
expert. So
yeah.
those who put the Quran didn't need help. That's why they had to go to the Syriac scholars.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Muhammad. What do the 7th century coins tell us about Muhammad?
Well, and before I get into that, we need to look at the word Muhammad. Now, when you say Muhammad, it has M-U-H-A-M-M-A-D. So you've added 3 vowels to it right there. There is no vowels in the 7th century, so let's take those 3 vowels out, okay? What does it become? Mahmad. Or Mim Ha Mim Dal.
Yes.
How do you pronounce Mim Ha Mim Dal? You don't. It could be Mahmad or Mehmad or Muhammad or Muf. You don't. So most people just say Mahmad. And if it goes back to Muhammad, that's a well-known word. But it's not a name. It's not a name at all. It's a title. And it's in Hebrew, and it's in Syriac, and it's originally in Ugaritic. It's the Ugaritics that introduced that name as the praised one, the altogether lovely adjectival phrase in 1400 BC. The Hebrews grabbed it and put it, it's right through the Old Testament. Look at Song of Solomon 5:16, talking about Solomon, the altogether lovely one. There's Muhammad. So there you have it introduced in Song of Solomon 5:16. All the way through the Old Testament, you have this Muhammad, the praised one, the altogether lovely. By the time you get to the 4th century, St. Jerome, who is a Christian, takes the word Muhammad, introduces it as the Messiah. He is the Muhammad. The Messiah is the Muhammad. So all the Syriac texts, the Aramaic texts, every time you see Muhammad, it is the Messiah. By the time you get to the 7th century then, where the coins are that you're talking about, the Muhammad is there. But look and see what it says on the coin. The Muhammad is the Messiah. Now, before I get into the coin, I want to do one more thing. What about the Jews? They were the ones that originated it. They were the ones that had it since the time of 1000 BC. They saw what the Christians were doing as the Messiah who's going to come a second time. They're saying, no, the Messiah is yet to come. The Muhammad, so they take the same word, Muhammad, and they apply it to their exilarchs. 5 different exilarchs in the 7th century, all living in Hira. We've got their documentation. Their names are there. We've got the inscriptions. Their names are always Muhammad. The Muhammad, the exilarch of this, Muhammad, the exilarch of that, gives his name. Once the exilarch dies, the next exilarch then takes the word. It's a title for the exilarch that he is going to be the Messiah. So now, can you see, the Muslims that start to introduce that, there are no Muslims in the 7th century. They don't appear to the 8th century, but they are from the line of Ishmael, so they're Ishmaelites. They don't have a prophet, they don't have a revelation. But the Jews and the Christians have a prophetic line and they have a revelation. They are waiting for the Messiah, the Christians, to come a second time. The Jews are waiting for it to come the first time. What do you think they're going to do as the ones in the new men in the house, the new people on the block? They now hold the largest land they own from Spain all the way over to India, from Turkey all the way to Yemen. They don't have a theological backbone for themselves, but their cousins, the Jews and Christians, do. They then say, you're waiting for the Messiah? We've got the Muhammad. Guess who he is? He is Muhammad. That's why his name starts to appear, but not till the 8th century. He is introduced on the Dome of the Rock with the double monarch in the late 7th century, but that's Jesus. That Muhammad, he's attacking the Trinity of Jesus, he's attacking the divinity of Jesus, and he's also attacking the Ascension on the Dome of the Rock and on the coins there. The real interesting one is the one that Muawiyah introduces in 663. There is a picture of Muawiyah. He's holding a cross. He has a cross above his head. On the backside is Muhammad. Who do you think that Muhammad is? That's Jesus. He is the Messiah. So the coins spell it for us. Just follow the sequence of the coins, and you will see who Muhammad is.
Shall we talk about the place? Why do you believe Mecca didn't actually exist?
Very, very simple reason. There's no reference to it at all, anywhere. You can't find it on any maps. You can't find it on any documentation. You don't find it in any inscriptions. It's not on any coins. There is nothing until 741. Muhammad died in 632. He was born there in 570. He was living there all the way up until 622. For 60 years, he supposedly lived there. There's no reference to it. If there's no reference, you need to ask why. Just look at a map. Open a map. Everybody just look at a map and look where it's situated. It's down off the plateau. It's the 3,000 feet off the plateau where all the towns were, where the oases are, the western plateau. It's 3,000 feet out. It has no water. No water, no food. No food, no people, no people, no towns, no cities, no cities, no civilization, no history. It's as simple as that. You have to have water for it to exist. The fact that no one knows about it, Dr. Patricia Krohn did all, she reached 15 languages. She went to every one of the civilizations, all the starting from 300 BC all the way up until the 7th century, not one reference to it. Yet all the other towns that are above it, up on the plateau, you have Najran, you have Taif, you have Yathrib, you have Khaybar, you have Tabuk, you have Petra. All of them are well documented. Why is it all these less significant cities are all documented, not one word of Mecca? Because it did exist.
And Mecca is supposed to be the mother of all cities.
Well, see, it's where Adam and Eve went to. If they went to, you can't get any earlier.
Yeah.
They're the first humans. They were sent down to Mecca when they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden.
Do you have an opinion about where the real Mecca was?
Yes, Jerusalem. You just look at Mecca today. Look and see what they do. They walk around a square building called the Kaaba, which means cube in Arabic. It also means cube in Hebrew. And they circumambulate 7 times counterclockwise. Who do you think does that? The Jews do that. They did it around the Holy of Holies. That's where they did. Mount Moriah. That's where the Holy of Holies was. That's where the Kaaba was, the Hebrew Kaaba. Circumambulating 7 times. Why counterclockwise? Because of Joshua. That's what Joshua was required to do. They had to circumambulate 7 times. Then what do the Muslims do? They then run them back between Marwa and Safa. Those mountains, go to Mecca. Well, you can't, but they're just rocks 20 feet high.
Yeah.
That's not a mountain to commemorate what Hagar did. No, look where Marwa and Safa are. The original Marwa is Mount Moriah. Marwa is the Arabic for it. You go down to the Kidron Valley, come back to the Mount Scopas. Those are mountains. That is Safa. The original ones are in Jerusalem. The Zamzam well, that's this pool of Siloam. So everything you see in Mecca today is a smaller facsimile of what was first in Jerusalem. They just want to recreate what the Jews was because they're waiting for the Messiah. They're saying, we have the Messiah. His name is Muhammad.
Amazing, Jay. It's been a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Thank you for your time, and God bless you.
God bless you too. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you.